us a call 0800 389 7321. We're going to talk about this after 9 o'clock. We're going to talk about the TV that we're watching nowadays, why we're turning our back on soaps, why we did love them, and potentially why they're now leaving us cold. To discuss this, let's talk to Ben Andrews, because he produces a podcast on EastEnders, and he's on the line now. Ben, very good morning to you. So what do you make of the news that we're waking up to this morning? EastEnders under 3 million for the first time. Has this soap still got legs?
Hello, Nick, and thanks for having me on the show. Yes, I think soaps will always have legs and a place on our television because you don't really get TV programmes which cover the range of storylines that soaps can cover. You know, you spend time with characters for 12 episodes a year on series, but with soaps, you're with these characters every single day for years and years and years. So I think soaps do have a longevity, and coming from the ratings of the 2.5 million slump, I think it's recently come out that was during a sudden change in the programming, which many fans didn't know about. Even people who listen to our podcast, who are, you know, the top of diehard fans, they didn't know that the schedule had changed. And also, you've got to remember that viewing habits of people have changed recently too. People, you know, save up the soap episodes for a whole week and binge watch them on a weekend. So I don't think it's really fair to say that the ratings have plummeted, because if you look at BBC iPlayer or the catch-up services for all the other soaps, they're constantly in the top 5 downloads week on week every year, even up there with Bodyguard, which is one of the highest rated shows on BBC recently.
Yeah. So is it the way in which we're looking at these figures? Is that the problem? If you look at the live figures, then of course they are going to show a rather depressed reading, but people are they're consuming this soap in a different way. They're downloading it, and therefore when you look at the combined viewership, it's more healthy?
It is, and you've got to remember, soaps, they haven't got a specific demographic. They're ranging from 14-year-olds right up to 80-year-olds. So the demographics of people watching the show some are going to download it, some are going to binge watch it, some are stuck in a routine, and if their soap is on, they'll sit down and watch it. And on the lowest ratings that came up on Tuesday, it clashed with Emmerdale, and I'm sure lots of people thought, oh, I'm not budging my Emmerdale, I'm sticking to watch that. And I think the ratings were actually chosen on the last 5 minutes of the time slot. So at that time, the credits were rolling on EastEnders, so it's quite understandable that they may have switched over by then.
What would you say to those who are arguing that EastEnders has had its day? I mean, we can't deny the fact that the soap is less popular than it once was. There is many more products on the market. There are many more products on the market which entice the viewer, and those products are increasingly international products. The emergence of Amazon Prime and Netflix has changed the landscape somewhat. So if people said, look, a public service broadcaster putting its money here doesn't sound like a viable proposition going forward.
I mean, you've got to remember the outstanding storylines they cover. Because you're carrying on with these characters every day for years, people get very attached to them. So then when they do these topical storylines where they do the Me Too movement, or they do consent, or they do male mental health, these things are never covered first on Amazon Prime dramas. It's always covered first on soaps. It's like back in the 80s, EastEnders was the first soap to show two men kissing. So you have to remember they've got this longevity, and it's important that these storylines are told, and they're real life storylines. You know, you're sitting in your living room with these people. They're like, you know them more than family sometimes. So these hard-hitting storylines, you don't get these on these dramas. They start with the soaps, and I think that's why it's important for the soaps that need to carry on. And with the taxpayers' money, the EastEnders set was originally made to only last around 5 to 10 years. So I think we've had our money's worth because we're going 35 years later. So you have to put that into account when you think about the spending as well.
Yeah, OK. Ben, great to have you on. Thank you, Ben Andrew there, who produces a podcast on EastEnders. Let's have a look at Coronation Street, because one of my treasured colleagues who I work with for many...
Absolutely brilliant. Joining me now is Darryl Weber, an entertainment and film expert who writes for the Essex Chronicle, and also Ben Andrews, host of the EastEnders weekly podcast. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Hello, Sadie. Thanks for having us.
Nice to have you both on. We've got you both on at the same time because we thought two people who know all about EastEnders is far better than me who knows nothing. So, Darryl, if we kick off with you, is a decline in ratings like this so out of the ordinary?
I think there was a particular night where the schedule got moved around, didn't it? And that accounts for this sort of big dip on one day. But I think there's been a gradual decline over the years. I think Ben might know more about that than me, but it seems to be the case that all programmes are suffering from the variety on offer. So all ratings are going down for single episodes, single series like that.
So what do you think then, Ben?
Well, yes, I mean, these headlines, you have to sort of take them with a pinch of salt, I think. I mean, when you look at the 2.9 million that it got, it's not including any downloads from iPlayer or people who recorded it or caught up on it later. Some people binge watch the whole week all in one go. So I think you really need to remember that people's viewing habits have changed. And obviously soaps, which cater to such a wide audience from teenagers right up to people in their 80s, all those different demographics are going to be trying to watch this show in different ways, on different devices, at different times.
And also 34 years, I mean, is it a struggle for the soaps to keep storylines sounding fresh, to finding new storylines, and also storylines that are believable? Because sometimes with soaps you actually go, it's just not believable. Do they lose viewers because of that, Darryl?
I think they do. I mean, I stopped watching EastEnders a couple of years ago on a regular basis because I felt it was getting pretty repetitious and, you know, if in doubt, bring Cat and Elfie back or... Yeah, there seems to be a recycling of characters and storylines, and I know they try and do some sort of contemporary stuff. They try and keep it relevant, but there also seems to be this sort of constant recycling of characters, which, you know, on one hand is familiar for people and they like it, but I think for me it became a bit of a turn-off.
Isn't that life, though? I mean, people do sort of pop up again, don't they? I mean, in a way, it's probably more true to life than most things in a soap.
Yeah, maybe that's true. I didn't want to keep watching it.
Ben, do you find that your weekly podcast, do they like these characters bouncing back in around the Cat, the Alfies of the series, or do they love the new stuff?
It's a bit of both, really. I mean, I think they've gone through 3 executive producers within 3 years, so the show's been always trying to catch up with itself and settle from that. I mean, bringing back old characters, some producers use it as an automatic way to get viewers watching again because it's something familiar. But at the same time, they're introducing new storylines and new relevant things that are happening in today's society. Like, you can go back and watch things from the 80s for EastEnders, and you'd get a real insight into what our country and what Britain and what London was like in the 80s. And the same thing could be said watching an episode from 2017, where you have things like consent and the Me Too movement and male mental health. So I think soaps will always be relevant to people because they're trying to do real issues that are happening with us today and now.
They're trying to reflect real life, but in a dramatic and entertaining way. There's been a lot of criticism from certain areas of the EastEnders being too down, being too sad, to being too harsh, and there's not enough humour in it. I mean, where do we stand on that, Darryl?
I think EastEnders has always been good at tackling issues like Ben alluded to, with the contemporary issues. It's a bit of a social document of the times we live in. But it's always tried to sort of offset that with bits of humour and characters who are sort of happy-go-lucky and sort of calamities always happen to in a good way. But, you know, I haven't watched it recently, so I don't know if there's still that element there. I think it's important to have that side to it because it can be a bit of a hard slog going through EastEnders sometimes.
And Ben, same thing to you. I mean, has it got enough humour? I mean, Coronation Street, I'm a Corrie girl. I think, you know, I just am because I was brought up with Coronation Street, and so it just goes on, that music plays and I suddenly go, oh, I'm at home. Because I remember it as a child. But they've had to insert a lot more comedy into it recently because they were criticised as well. Well, where are the great comedy characters, the ones we love to laugh at? You know, as soon as we lost a couple of the characters, unfortunately, but they have introduced others. What about in EastEnders?
I mean, classic EastEnders used to have great comedy, and I think the thing you have to worry about with comedy is it's the hardest thing to write well. And I'm the first one to moan at EastEnders when they try and do comedy and it doesn't come across well. But there's slight improvements recently. The teams have changed a little bit recently, and there is comedy elements. But I think EastEnders has always been known as the more gritty, realistic soap, which is probably why Kate Oates suits it so well now, because she's more into that gritty side.
I mean, does anything need to change on the show, do you think, Ben, to attract more viewers?
I I mean, I think the viewing figures are actually improved from this time last year. You have to remember that on iPlayer, the EastEnders episodes are regularly in the top 5 of most watched shows. So it's not that people aren't watching them, it's just maybe that they're not watching them as scheduled programming. So maybe something they'll have to do is maybe have more of those water cooler moments where you have to tune in that day to then talk about it with everyone the next day. I think that's the one thing that they'll need to try and do.
That's sort of missing.
Viewing habits have changed, isn't it? Generally, I mean, I'm more excited about Stranger Things coming back this week, and I know I can, watch that in a few weeks, or on some series you can binge watch. And I think EastEnders, like you say, Ben, people can watch or downloads or catch up with it, but as an ongoing drama, it's hard to keep the momentum going against a series that has come in with a sort of 8 big episodes that are compelling for you to watch all at once.
Stranger Things, this is a new one, is it?
It's a Netflix series sort of set in the 80s about spooky things going on in this small town America. And it's one of those sort of examples of how Netflix and that kind of streaming service has really taken off and had big hits.
Right, yeah, they have. I don't have Netflix, and I must admit I may be thinking about getting it. But finally, as well, gentlemen, I mean, are there just is EastEnders on too many times now? At one time it was twice a week, wasn't it? How many times a week now? Seems to be on every night, as far as I can see. After the one show, it's doof time, and I'm sort of going, oh right, okay. So how many times is it on, Ben? And is it on too often?
It's on 4 times a week, which is the least amount of any of the soaps. So I think it's on 6 or 7 times now, which is far too much. I mean, I think 4 is plenty. I think once you start increasing episodes, you're just stretching out plots which don't need to be stretched out.
Right, and finally as well, if I can ask you that, Darryl, and also if I can ask you, have any other soaps had ratings like this at times? I mean, is it a case that this happens at times and it's for reasons and then they move on?
I think they all have peaks and troughs, don't they? I mean, it depends on whether people connect with the characters or particular storylines. And like they were saying, in the past you would have had water cooler moments where you have to watch when Angie and Den had a big row, or you found out who Michelle's baby's father was. Those moments happen less now because of the way you watch TV. I think EastEnders will bounce back because, it's a bit of an institution, and it's something we all know is on at a certain time of day when we get home from work or, we finish school. And I think it's nice to know it's there even if you don't watch it all the time.
Well, I thank you very much indeed, both of you, for joining us. Darryl Weber, entertainment and film expert who writes for the Essex Chronicle, and Ben Andrews, host of the EastEnders weekly podcast. So over to you. Do you watch? Or what is your favourite soap?